The Miller family lived at the edge of Lancaster County, nestled deep in a secluded pocket of the Amish countryside. Their small wooden farmhouse, hand-built by Eli Miller himself, stood beside rows of cornfields that stretched out like golden waves. Eli was a reserved but respected man in the community, known for his precision in carpentry and unwavering devotion to the ordning. His wife, Ruth, was warm and quiet, often seen with her daughters tending to their herb garden or hanging laundry at dawn. They had 3 children, Isaacina, and little Jacob, each with wide eyes and sun-kissed cheeks, the picture of innocence in a world untouched by modern chaos. On a misty July morning in 1992, a neighbor named Jeremiah Stoltz made his routine stop by the Miller's home to pick up handcrafted wooden chairs Eli had promised him. When he arrived, the front door was slightly ajar. That, in itself, was odd. Amish doors were never left open unless someone was expecting you. He called out a greeting, no answer. He stepped cautiously inside. The house was silent, too silent. Ruth's baking still sat fresh on the kitchen counter, untouched. A kettle had boiled dry on the stove. A loaf of bread had fallen sideways, everything looked frozen in time. Jeremiah's unease deepened as he wandered room to room. The children's beds were neatly made. Their dolls and carved animals were still lined up on the shelves. The horses remained in the barn, saddled but not fed. Even the family's dog, Benji, a loyal farm mutt, was nowhere to be found. It was as if the Millers had simply walked out of their lives in the middle of a perfectly ordinary day, without packing, without warning, and most disturbingly, without a sound. By nightfall, word of the missing family had spread like wildfire through the Amish and English communities alike. Police arrived, and an organized search began, scouring nearby fields, woods, and streams. Volunteers, lanterns in hand, formed human chains combing through the tall grass. Dogs were brought in, helicopters hovered overhead, but no signs of struggle, no footprints leading away from the property. Number notes. No calls, no ransom, not even a broken fence post. It was as though the earth had opened up and swallowed the family whole. Then came the questions. Could they have left voluntarily? Unlikely. The Amish do not simply disappear. Their world is deeply rooted in tradition, family, and faith. Some whispered that maybe Eli had led them into the woods on some spiritual journey. Others suggested something darker, maybe foul play from outsiders who didn't understand their ways. But none of those theories explained the single most disturbing part: how 5 people could vanish from their home in broad daylight and leave behind a house that looked like they'd be back any second. In the weeks that followed the Miller family's disappearance, the official investigation produced little beyond empty theories and mounting frustration. The police reports were vague. There were no suspects, no signs of forced entry, and nothing that could be tied to a crime. The case file grew thick with dead ends, but in hushed voices, away from the ears of the English authorities, the local Amish began sharing what they had seen or heard on the night the Millers vanished. These were not tales meant for public discussion. They were quiet, nervous confessions whispered behind barns and passed from elder to elder, like fragments of a dark prayer no one wanted to say aloud. A teenage boy named Levi, who lived 3 farms down, recalled waking up in the middle of the night to a strange orange glow filtering through his bedroom window. He had thought it was lightning at first. But when he looked out, the sky was clear. The light, he claimed, came from beyond the Miller's property, flickering, pulsating like a heartbeat. Another farmer's wife said she had seen shadows moving in the tree line that night. Not animals, she insisted. These moved with purpose, 2-legged fast, but almost too smooth in the way they glided across the fields. She was too afraid to step outside. Most chilling of all was what the bishop of their district quietly revealed to a visiting preacher weeks after the disappearance. On the same night the Millers vanished, the bishop had been riding back home from a prayer meeting when he heard a low, mechanical humming in the distance, steady, unnatural, like nothing he had ever heard in the countryside before. It wasn't a tractor or generator. This was something else, something unfamiliar. He said it vibrated in his chest and made the horse refuse to move forward, as if some invisible wall had risen around the Millerland. He kept that detail to himself, fearing it would only stir unrest or worse, attract outsiders looking to sensationalize the tragedy. By mid-August, stories like these had become an unspoken thread that wove through the community, but no one dared report them to police. The Amish had a long-standing mistrust of law enforcement, and besides, how could they explain what they couldn't prove? Lights that came from nowhere. sounds that machines shouldn't make, shadows that moved like whispers. Some began to suspect the Millers had come into contact with something forbidden, something that didn't belong in the peaceful rhythms of Amish life. The community's unease grew heavier with each passing night. To outsiders, it all sounded like superstition. But within the Amish, where silence often hides deeper truths, these stories were warnings. Mothers began keeping their children indoors after sunset. Fathers made nightly rounds with oil lanterns, checking for footprints near barns and fences. And still, no answers came, only the wind through the cornfields, and that same mechanical hum, faint, distant, returning now and then like an echo that refused to die. Nearly a decade passed, and the Miller family became more of a legend than a memory in Lancaster County. For the English, their disappearance faded into another unsolved mystery. But for the Amish, the loss remained a haunting silence that lingered just beneath the surface. That silence shattered on a stormy night in 2002 when a violent thunderstorm tore through the valley, ripping shingles from roofs, flattening crops, and toppling an old, long-abandoned barn on the edge of a forgotten property. It had once belonged to a distant relative of the Millers but had been vacant since the 1980s. No one had dared to restore it. Many in the community quietly referred to it as unblessed land. When the storm passed and the rain settled into a soft morning mist, a group of young men set out to assess the damage. One of them, Jonas Lapp, noticed something unusual in the wreckage. The east-facing wall of the barn had caved in, revealing something hidden behind it, a crude trapdoor. Bolted shut with heavy iron hinges and covered by wooden planks that had been nailed down and reinforced from the outside. The door was stained with age, but the markings carved into it were disturbingly clear. Lines, shapes, and symbols, some resembling folk hexes, used by the Amish for blessings, but twisted, altered. Jonah stepped back. Something about the design made his stomach churn. Word spread quickly. Soon, several elders and townspeople arrived to examine the site. No one recognized the symbols, not fully, but one man, an aging woodworker named Abram Byler, whispered that the style of carving looked eerily familiar. He had once crafted furniture with Eli Miller, meticulously built by hand, without a single nail out of place. The technique on the trapdoor, he said, was identical to Eli's. That revelation struck the group cold. Why would Eli have carved something like this? And why would it be hidden on someone else's land, bolted shut for years, sealed as if to keep something inside? Among the crowd was Sarah Yoder, the oldest woman in the district. Known for her deep memory of Amish customs and superstitions, she stared at the carvings for a long time before reaching out a trembling finger toward a tiny symbol near the lower right corner, a five-pointed star enclosed in a circle. That mark, she said quietly, should never be carved. It's the sign of a mechanical spirit. A false angel. In the old tales, we call it Der Schattenmacher, the shadow maker. It comes to those who seek forbidden knowledge and always demands a price. Her words sent a shiver through the gathering. No one spoke for a long time. But the trapdoor was real. And whatever it hid had been untouched for years. It didn't make sense how Eli's craftsmanship ended up in a barn that didn't belong to him, how it had stayed hidden all this time, and what purpose such a structure could possibly serve in a devout Amish life. The questions were piling up faster than answers. Some wanted to walk away and leave it sealed forever. Others argued it needed to be open, that the community couldn't move forward until the truth, however dark, was finally brought into the light. After hours of hushed debate, the elders reluctantly gave permission to open the trapdoor beneath the collapsed barn. A few of the younger men, guided by their fathers and grandfathers, unbolted the rusted hinges and lifted the creaking wood panel with crowbars. The scent that emerged was like damp soil mixed with old oil, an unnatural, cloying smell that didn't belong in a barn or anywhere near Amish land. Below lay a narrow wooden staircase, spiraling into darkness. It was far too deep to be a mere storage cellar. The group hesitated at the top, lanterns in hand, unsure if they were about to uncover a long-forgotten basement, or something else entirely. They descended slowly, footsteps muffled by a thick layer of dust and time. The underground chamber was smaller than expected, maybe 20 feet wide, but its walls were lined with wooden shelves, each stacked with objects that didn't belong in a simple farming life. Odd mechanical parts, hand-carved gears, tools that looked like hybrids of clockwork and farming implements. Dozens of thick notebooks were stacked in the corners, filled with hand-drawn diagrams, equations, and journal entries in Eli's handwriting. The language started plainly testing movement. modified crankshaft but slowly spiraled into fragmented ramblings about energy, control, and something he only referred to as the Whisperer. It was Sarah Yoder, the elder woman, who noticed what the rest had missed. As everyone else focused on the strange tools and unreadable schematics, she stood silently in one corner of the room, staring at a section of wall that seemed off. It was cleaner than the rest, scrubbed of dust. At its center was a small, polished wooden plaque bolted into the stone. Carved into it was the same five-pointed star within a circle, the one she had seen on the trapdoor. But beneath it, barely visible, was a second carving. Sarah brushed her fingers over it, wiping away decades of grime, and saw a single Amish phrase. He came when the light flickered. She turned to the others, her face pale. "This is not just about Eli building something he shouldn't," she whispered. "This is an invitation. He asked it to come." Her words stunned the group into silence. The Amish rarely speak of evil by name, and even more rarely do they accept that one of their own may have invited it in willingly. But the implications were impossible to ignore. This wasn't simply a place to hide machinery, it was a shrine, or perhaps even a gateway. The layout of the room, the precision of the carvings, the meticulous care taken to seal it all hinted at something deeply intentional, something ritualistic. No one said it out loud, but they all felt it. Eli Miller had been hiding something far more than just forbidden technology, and now that the door had been opened, the air itself felt different, heavier, tense, as if the room was waiting for something. A few men wanted to leave immediately and never speak of it again, but the younger ones, driven by curiosity or perhaps fear, insisted they search the rest of the chamber. They had barely begun to uncover the truth. Somewhere down there, amid the tools and notebooks, was the next piece of a puzzle they no longer knew how to stop solving. The deeper the group explored the underground chamber, the more it felt like stepping into the fractured mind of a man who had strayed far from the path of tradition. Dust danced in the lantern light as the men examined each corner of the room. Despite being hidden for a decade, the place felt preserved, undisturbed by time. On the far wall, pinned with rusty nails, were hand-sketched blueprints unlike anything the Amish would ever allow in their homes. They showed diagrams of intricate gear systems, lever-driven machines, and pressure-based turbines, all carved with eerie precision. Some were labeled in English. Others were scrawled in cryptic symbols that no one could decipher. Beneath the diagrams sat workbenches littered with unfinished construct pieces of wooden machinery with strange, almost insect-like joints. One of the benches held something that looked like a crude puppet made of gears and leather straps, headless, with a hollow space in the chest. Another machine looked like it had been built to listen. It had a horn-shaped opening like a phonograph, and wires that fed into what appeared to be a primitive recording mechanism. The design was far beyond what Eli should have been capable of building, especially without electricity or modern tools. The men exchanged glances of unease. These weren't tools for farming. They were tools for something else. In the corner of the room, they found a wooden cradle. The sight of it stopped them cold. It was beautifully carved, with flower patterns along its edge, clearly the handiwork of Eli, who was known for crafting toys and furniture for his children. The cradle rocked gently, almost imperceptibly, though no one had touched it. One man stepped forward and shined his lantern inside. It was empty, but beneath the blanket lay something worse than a child's absence: a single baby's bonnet, torn and scorched at the edges. There was no dust on it. It looked freshly placed, almost as if someone had been there recently. Behind the cradle was a small trunk. Inside it were dozens of pages torn from Eli's journals, many too damaged to read. But the ones that remained painted a chilling picture. "It watches me when I work," one entry read. "It whispers when I'm alone in the barn. I gave it shape, and now it wants more." Another page had only a single sentence, repeated again and again, in shaking, desperate handwriting. "The machine sees the soul. The machine sees the soul." Some pages included scribbled sketches of an elongated figure with no face, sometimes drawn in the corner of the page as if Eli didn't want to look directly at it. None of the men spoke. The longer they stayed underground, the more the air felt charged, like the low thrum of a storm about to break. Sarah Yoder refused to descend any further. She waited above, praying beneath her breath, her fingers curled tightly around a small wooden cross. One of the younger men, out of sheer instinct, tried to wind one of the machines. The moment he did, a soft click echoed through the room, and something in the far wall shifted. Not visibly, but it moved. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough for every soul in that chamber to suddenly feel that they were no longer alone. As the group began sorting through the remnants of Eli's forgotten workshop, one object stood out from the rest: an old, dust-covered cassette tape recorder, tucked beneath a collapsed shelf near the back of the chamber. It was foreign to Amish life. The community forbade such devices, yet here it was, an undeniable artifact of the modern world. Wrapped in cloth and hidden away like a relic of sin, its presence alone was a violation of every rule the Amish held sacred. More disturbing, however, was the fact that a tape was still inside. Labeled in shaky handwriting, Day 43. No one knew what it meant, but curiosity quickly overwhelmed fear. They took the recorder to the surface, wary of playing it underground. A young man fetched an old battery pack from the English hardware store several miles away. When the group reconvened later that evening, this time in a locked barn, far from the eyes of children, they inserted the battery and pressed play. The machine clicked, word, and began to speak in Eli Miller's voice. At first, it was calm, calculated. He described the machine he was building, its parts, the way it moved. He spoke of sustained motion without visible force and non-linear vibration patterns. It sounded more like a scientist's dictation than a farmer's musings. But then, as the tape progressed, Eli's voice began to fray. His words became disjointed, nervous. "It works, but only when I'm alone," he said in a whisper. When Ruth came near it, it stopped. "It knows when she's watching. It knows when the children are close." There was a long pause, filled only with the sound of Eli breathing. Then came something unexpected. A second sound, barely audible at first, like a faint ticking or whispering in the background. Not from Eli, from something else. "It wants to be fed," he muttered. "It doesn't eat food. It feeds on moments." It fed on the night Anna cried. It fed on the silence when Jacob disappeared from the garden and returned. Wrong. The next portion of the tape was damaged, warped and warbling, like the recorder itself was choking on the memories it had captured. When it stabilized again, Eli was crying. "I thought I could control it," he sobbed. "It told me it could help us make farming easier, keep our ways safe from the outside. It said it would never leave, but I didn't understand." "It doesn't want to leave? Because it belongs here now." There was a sudden crash on the tape, like a door slamming or something heavy falling. Then silence, followed by the slow creaking sound of something mechanical, turning slow and deliberate. And then a voice. No one in the barn moved as the final seconds of the recording played. The voice wasn't Eli's, it was deeper, distorted, and unrecognizable, speaking in a language no one could understand. It didn't sound human. It didn't sound electronic either, just wrong. Some believed it was the machine. Others whispered it was something inside the machine. Either way, the last thing the recorder captured before the tape ended was Eli's voice one last time, barely a whisper. "If you're hearing this, don't open the second door." The warning on the tape, "Don't open the second door," echoed in everyone's minds like a curse. Yet no one could say where this so-called second door even was. Had it already been opened? Was it literal or metaphorical? The fear lingered, but so did a dark sense of inevitability. Despite efforts to reseal the trapdoor and keep the chamber's discovery quiet, rumors had begun to leak into the surrounding community. A few English teenagers, hearing whispers of a haunted Amish basement, snuck onto the property one night. They never made it into the chamber. One slipped and broke his arm on the rotted floorboards, but what they saw from above, before being found, was enough to reignite the legend. They claimed the cradle was no longer empty. It wasn't a baby, they said. It wasn't even shaped like a person, just something curled in the blankets, breathing shallowly with glints of metal and skin, but not quite either. Local authorities chalked it up to panic and imagination. But those who had been inside the chamber, those who had heard the tape, seen the diagrams, read Eli's descent into madness, they knew better. Something had awakened down there. Or perhaps, it had never slept. The trapdoor was bolted again, this time with iron and sealed under poured concrete by order of the community elders. But that only made the story spread wider and darker. A month later, strange sounds returned to the woods surrounding the old Miller farm. Locals reported hearing the rhythmic clank of gears in the middle of the night, followed by complete silence, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. Animals refused to go near the property. Horses panicked if led within 100 feet. Lanterns flickered out the moment anyone tried to approach after dark. Sarah Yoder passed away quietly in her sleep around that time, and many believed it was fear not age that took her. Before she died, she was heard mumbling the same phrase over and over. "It's not just the door, it's what we brought through it." The community tried to move on. But then, in early spring of 2003. The anniversary of the Millers' disappearance, an unsettling discovery was made. A neighboring family awoke to find a symbol carved into their barn door, almost identical to the one from the trapdoor. Only this one glowed faintly in the early morning light. It hadn't been painted or burned, it was etched, as if by something impossibly precise. That same day, the family's youngest child complained of the tall man watching her from the cornfield. She said he had no face, just a mouth that clicked when it smiled. Soon after, more families began noticing small changes: farm tools going missing, strange footprints that seemed mechanical, odd impressions left in the snow that resembled a child's hand, but with too many fingers. Still, no one would speak of it aloud. The Amish have always believed in silence as protection, but this time, it felt like the silence was being watched. And underneath it all, there was a growing, terrible certainty. The machine, the thing, was not only still here, it was learning. To this day, the Miller family has never been found. No bodies, no answers, just a sealed concrete floor. And a legacy of silence that stretches across Lancaster County like a shadow no one wants to name. The barn was eventually torn down by order of the elders, but the land it stood on has never been resettled. Grass refuses to grow there. Animals won't cross it. And those who live nearby say that sometimes, late at night, they still hear the soft clicking of gears, echoing through the trees like something hidden just below the surface is still turning. Eli Miller thought he could merge tradition with progress. He thought he could contain it, control it, but whatever came through that door wasn't meant to be part of this world, and now, it is. And if you ever find yourself driving through rural Pennsylvania, and you pass a farm where the lanterns flicker even when there's no wind, don't stop, don't listen, and whatever you do, never ever open the second door.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.